Okay, so I think, hey guys, I'm from India. My name is Tarun, and I'm mostly working on Nuxt.js, Vue.js, and many front-end technologies. I'm also working on some of the DevOps and stuff like that. So I'm a co-founder and CTO of Icon Scout. It's a design resource marketplace, and today's presentation basically comes from how we optimize Icon Scout like for page speed. Right? So we have like more than 250 components and more than 100 pages on Icon Scout, which are being served using SSR. Right? So we usually we have around 2 million pages right now indexed on Google. Right, so we are managing SSRs and optimizing those stuff. Right, so we started doing experimenting with Vue.js a year back. Right, at that time we had our PageSpeed core, Google PageSpeed core score, which we manage usually. Right, for looking at how good the performance is. Right, so that was around 40, and right now we have reached to 80, 85, and there are many more optimization already upcoming. Right. So I think I hope this presentation will help you to look into that. How can you optimize your own maybe a million pages, right? Or let's say a small product, right? So that will be useful. And you guys can see my screen. Okay, yeah, okay, you can see. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so let's start like uh, 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 okay, so overall, the things we are covering will be, why should we optimize or why should we increase the speed, right? Because as a developer, we are more into coding and we like to experiment new code, new library. We do play with the new libraries as and anytime we find a new library, we just npm install and stuff like that. So, why the optimization is useful and the main topic will be there for a slide. Then why not go pure Vue.js? Right? So I'm like I earlier learned Vue.js as a like 2 years back, and then I learned Vue Router, Vuex to state management and stuff. Right? Then eventually I came to know about Nuxt project, and I started using that for a side project, and then right now I'm using even if I want to put up a simple Vue.js project to try out a Vue itself or maybe any simpler component, I usually put up Nuxt only. I don't use Vue directly, right? Because it gives some of the out of the box functionality. So I'll tell you about how can Nuxt be useful in terms rather than Vue.js in terms of speed and performance. And obviously that's based on Vue only, right? Then which are the tools which that can be useful, right? So the main aspect of optimization or any improvement is that we need to know how till which stage we have reached, right? So we need to know continuously look at the states and metrics to be taken care, right? Then there are some of the HTML CSS optimization methods which are there, or I think many of us might be using them already, right? Then what are the things that you can you can take care of, right? That will cover in JS code optimization, right? So there are many methods that's by let's say a webpack. Then some of the tricks that I have used to optimize website like Icon Scout, right? So we'll go into that. And then there are some of the other optimization techniques which you can use to speed up more go into deep. Right? So let's begin with why. So I can see your YouTube chat. I mean, I'm able to see you guys on chat, right? So whenever I ask a question or we can have conversation via chat, right? So I'll ask the question and you can answer me, or maybe you can support me via there, right? So how many of you think that speed improvement is something you are looking into in upcoming, or you have worked on, or you think that's an important? How many of you think that? You can reply to the chat itself. I'll mark it live chat. Okay, perfect. Okay, I can see many people: Arle, Philip, Fabio, Christos, Norman. That's how many of you think that it's important to have or improve the speed of the site? Okay, so we'll. Hello. Am I audible? Someone is telling me he lost the sound. How many of you think that speed improvement is important for you? Maybe there might be some issue from my end. Yes, correct, correct. Right. So let's go into like why question, right? So I think many of the marketing people usually tell us these states and they, tell us how important it is, right? So we'll go on one or two states on why is it important, right, to improve the speed, right? Okay. So usually, like all of us, even being a developer, right, we know that the site may take time, but right, site may take time to load, right? But what is the ideal time for end user to wait for, right? So ideally, user can wait for 6 to 10 seconds. Like 30% of user can wait for 6 to 10 seconds to load the website. Right. And if you go beyond 6 to 10 seconds, then you will see drop off the user, right? Yeah, eventually one by one, right? So Google is also like telling us for to go with mobile first site, and then they are also telling us to improve the speed, use some caching methodology and stuff to improve the speed, right? So this is from the user chart that how like let's say 3% user wants that the pages should load before 3 seconds, then 16% of users are like that the page should load between uh, 5 seconds, right? Then 6 to 10 seconds and many more, right? So the thing is, usually in e-commerce, Neil Patel, I think you might know Neil Patel. He's a very good in SEO guy. Like he's good into marketing and stuff, right? So he tells us that usually 1 second delay in a page response can result in a 7% reduction in conversion rate, right? So if let's say that's your e-commerce product, or let's say that's a blog, right? So there can be 7% less users on your blog or on your customer or in any your targeted audience, right? So there can if you add one more second to so it's like if you reduce your increase your speed by 1 second, your conversion rate can increase, let's say, up to 7%. Right. So obviously, like as if we are into SaaS tool, if we are making a SaaS tool or any side product or even a blog, right? So we want our users to stay with us. We want them to browse more through the site, right? So it's very important to improve the speed, and even 1 second can matter, right? Because usually when we are working as a developer, we are working on fast computer, fast internet. So we don't like get to know that the site is slow, right? But when we go to, let's say, end user, so they will feel slow sites and laggy site in that devices, right? Due to multiple issues, network, then that device performance speed and many other things, right? So then comes the next question is why not pure Vue.js, right? So obviously, like Nuxt.js is based on Vue.js. So what are the good advantages from Nuxt that it gives us to the benefits of Nuxt versus Vue, right? So usually this is mostly doesn't apply to single page web applications, right? So usually when we are working on in a team or in a on any product, right? So we have okay. Yeah, so we have multiple pages. Let's say we have admin, we have a dashboard, we have front pages, some of the other landing pages, right? So we'll be using, let's say, Vue.js plus Vue routers. Then we might have some of the states that needs to be managed. Let's say user login and user other area, their settings, their profile, and then that n number of their likes, their favorites, and stuff like that. So we need to manage those things in Vuex, right? And then we might have some other things too, right? So we like we when we are working with native Vue.js, so we'll have to optimize even webpack config, right? So what Nuxt gives is that it gives us first thing is it gives us this Vue router which is already lazy loaded, right? So you might have heard of that. Lazy loading is one of the important aspects, right? So if let's say if you have a home page, then we'll only load the components related to home page only. Let's say if we have, let's say, admin pages or dashboard, right? So we'll only load the page which is related to those routes, right? So one thing that Nuxt gives is this auto inbuilt optimization methods, right? It also gives us the folder structure, right? Because whenever we start with any library or new framework, right, we need to know that how where should I put my Vue files, where should I put my JavaScript file, where should I put my images or CSS assets, JavaScript assets, or any other assets, right? Then there can be any static styles or everything, right? So using Nuxt, one advantage is that it gives us out of the box view routing, auto auto improved view routing, which automatically loads uh, components on demand, right? Then folder structure, that is something they have managed very well, right? You have pages, you have components directory, right? We have static directory, right? So they have managed all the assets directory, right? So we don't have to Google through like what can be good folder structure for that, right? So that is also one more advantage, right? Then there are many other webpack optimizations already implemented in Nuxt.js. Right. For example, if you don't use Vuex, then it will automatically remove the Vuex from the code. Right? It won't include that in the bundle, right? So if you use that, then and only then it will include that, right? So there are many of these bundle optimized things that available in Nuxt.js inbuilt. Right. So using Vue.js and C, when you use Nuxt.js, obviously we think that there might be multiple packages that have been included, right? But even if you boot up new fresh Nuxt.js, you will get 100 page score on Google. Right, so it's not an issue. Like you can use Vue and like rather than using Vue, I'll prefer Nuxt because it gives us all this functionality routing, then Vuex, then some of the Webpack optimization, this lazy loading of my code, and everything is inbuilt in the Nuxt.js. Right? So first thing is we need to make sure that we, as far as possible, we'll use Nuxt.js as a our base framework as a library. Right. Then, yeah, so we need to know what are the tools to be used. Right. So there are multiple tools that you can utilize to know different aspects of your improvements. Right. So one of the most important and mostly used tool is Google PageSpeed Insights. Right, which gives us like multiple, which renders the same way the site will load on let's say mobile device or on a laptop, and it shows us other parameters such as scroll, first loading screens, and CPU, time to interactive, and many other insights, right? And there is one more tool called GT Matrix, right? So I do have added links at the end of the slide. So GT Matrix is something which shows us the, mostly I use a waterfall in that, right? So what we as a developer want to know is this is the first request that went to our server, right? Then we want to know which are the consequence request that's been requested to our server, right? So then in from that we can also know and optimize our code. Right? This is one of the important tool, or you can say Webpack package, that is called Webpack Bundle Analyzer, right? So using that, you can see how the tree structure of your code is, right? Then in Chrome Dev Tools, we do have some of the tools which is let's say code coverage, right? So we can use those tools to optimize our site, right? So let's go to them one by one. So first tool is Google PageSpeed, right? So what it gives is okay. So the thing is, usually for most of the site, you can go with Google PageSpeed, and you can improvise the site by using just Google PageSpeed. You won't need any other tool to go into, right? So what Google PageSpeed gives us is it gives us what was the first server response time, right? So ideally, we might be using, let's say, any server. We might have Ubuntu or static VM or anything. We might have static website, single page applications. Like we might have used hosted it on Netlify or anywhere, right? So it'll show us response type of our server. Then the other parameters such as the CSS files we are loading, the resources we are loading, CSS, JavaScript, any other links that we are loading, images, right? So it will show us that if we need to improvise those images, right? So there might be a case that we might be using 2000 by 2000 image in 200 by 200 requests, right? So Google PageSpeed will show it in upfront. Right? So we can go to that and we can just improvise those images and compress those images, right? Then it also shows us the time to interactive of the site, right? So ideally the thing is when you load a site, you can't immediately access the site, right? So which is very important because if your target users are basically coming to your site to read the blog, right? So maybe user wants to scroll immediately to go to the main content, right? So it shows us how much time does the site take to get interactive, right? To be accessible by users. Then it also shows us our JavaScript execution time, right? Like for example, we have some heavy JavaScript added to our website or to our code base, right? So it will show us that hey, these are the JavaScript files which are taking more time, so we maybe replace them with some other libraries, or that's not necessary, or that is not a very important feature. Then we can remove that, and we can also analyze that. Hey, this is, let's say, home page, and we have used this library inside the dashboard, right? So we can optimize our code in a way that it will only be loaded in the dashboard, not on the home page. Right? So Google Page will show all the basic stuff regarding optimization that we need. Right. Then GT metrics, as I told you, like it will show us the graph of how the site is loaded. Right. So I created a site which for on the first page, obviously it will load the home page. Then there will be tons of JavaScript files. Then there will be some of the images. Right. So using which we can also determine that if some third party library, let's say we might have added Facebook Analytics or Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager or any other analytics tool, that we might have added some uh, advertisement tool or advertisement library, right? Or let's say customer support tool, right? So we can look into the full waterfall of the site and get into that which can be removed or which can be delayed to load. Right? So GT metrics can be useful to know the exact order of execution of the JavaScript file. I mean, not execution order, but exact order of loading of the this JavaScripts or images or any other library, right? Then we have, this is one of the important tools, right? So this is Webpack Bundle Analyzer, right? So this is left hand side, we have a sample image of Webpack Bundle Analyzer, right? So this shows us that we have, let's say, our vendor file in which we have our node modules. We might be using Bootstrap Vue. We might be using some kind of carousel. We might have Bootstrap CSS. There is also Popper. We might have Moment.js, Lodash, and underscore JS, and any number of packages, right? So this will show us all the vendor packages. Like basically Webpack is a tree, right? So what we do is we have one entry file which is, let's say, index.js, and in that we might be loading another file. Then in those files we might have some other module to be being loaded. Right. So this creates a tree of the JavaScript or application, right? So using Webpack Bundle Analyzer, we can look into how this tree looks, right? So usually what happens when I optimize even any new website, so I when I go and check their bundle analyzer code, so you'll find that they just have one main.js or let's say one vendor.js file, right, which is being loaded and which will be loaded all in all the pages, right? So all the packages, we might have, let's say, 10, 20, 30 different packages being used on the website. They might be on homepage, dashboard, any other pages, right? So all of them will be like loaded at once, right? But we don't need them, right? So we're using Webpack and bundle analyzer. We can think, let's say, hey, there is this view carousel over there, right? But that's not required in home page, right? Or that's not required in all the pages, right? So we need to optimize this JavaScript, or we need to lazy load this module, or let's say delay this module to be loaded, right? So we can do something like, let's say, set a timeout, or we can also load this page by page, right? So usually this happens when we use a lot of Nuxt module, right? So when you go and check on any let's say you want a carousel or you want a bootstrap, right? Or you want any other library, even let's say image resizing library, right? So you will find that Nuxt module, right? So there will be, let's say, Nuxt bootstrap view, Nuxt popper, Nuxt view carousel, right? So what we have to do is, and what we do usually is we just put them in on Nuxt config in the module section, right? So what happens due to that is all these packages which are not being used on all the pages will be loaded at one. Right? So all of them will be called a vendor, which is basically a node module folder. That's all of them will be uh, uh, um, imported in a single vendor file, right? But that's not required, right? So usually what I do is I don't use Nuxt module like Nuxt module as far as possible, or if the let's say I use Nuxt module when it's let's say a library like XOS. Right? So we need to call API call, right? So that will be there on all the pages usually. Right? So I'll include them on modules, right? But carousel or let's say some popper or Lodash or moment. So I want to use Nuxt moment.js or Nuxt Lodash. I'll directly import them wherever I need them, right? Rather than using them as a Nuxt module. Right? So Webpack Analyzer, Bundle Analyzer will help us to look at the trees. And usually, what we need to understand is the more number of these segments are the files are, that will be the more will be the speed. Right? So if there are one files and we can convert them to 5 or 6 files, then the page speed will be increased for individual pages. I'm not talking about the whole site, because obviously user one is not going to visit the full site at first load, right? So what we have to do is we have to divide them, divide the JavaScript or modules or everything, right? So using Webpack bundle analyzer, you can do that. Then yeah, this is one of the important aspects of that I learned last month only. So it's called code coverage in Chrome DevTools. Right? So if you go to sources and there is a tab called coverage in that, right? Or you can record this thing. Right? So what we can do is basically, so when we load, let's say any page, right? So there might be 5 or 10 JavaScript files, right? And there might be 1, 2, 3 CSS files, right? But we need to know is that how many of them are actually being executed, or we need to know that what is the percentage of code that's not being touched, right? So usually I have seen that many of the websites are having more than 50% of JavaScript code or CSS codes which is not being used on that page. Right. So what we did is we basically went to our home page and we run this code coverage in Chrome DevTools, and then we checked how many unused bytes were there. Right. So this is a screenshot from that. So I had like 87% of some of the JavaScript that's not being used, 67% of some one more JavaScript that's not being used, and the page is loaded or when I scroll the page. Right. So what I did was I went into that JavaScript and I checked which are the packages are there, right? And I removed those packages one by one, or I lazy loaded them, right? Then with CSS, what we do is usually we just import the full bootstrap SCSS file or CSS, right? So what we should do is when we do a code coverage, so there is also CSS in this thing, right? So you can also see there was around 85% unused code in CSS, right? So what we can do is we can remove those extra CSS. Let's say if we have a home page which is not using stuff like card, jumbo. If you are using Bootstrap, in case of Bootstrap, so labels, then pages, cards, jumbotron. Then there are many other utility classes that's available. For example, margin, padding, and display classes and many more, right? Buttons, we have let's say we have 1, 2 type of button that's being used on the side, but there the bootstrap will give us 5 types of buttons, right? One will be primary, secondary, success, danger, warning, information, right? So what we have to do is once we look into this CSS, we'll have to go and remove those CSS, right? You can, if you are using Tailwind CSS, then there is also a package called per CSS, which you can use to remove unused Tailwind CSS codes, right? So using code coverage, what we can do is we will be able to optimize. We will be able to see what is the percentage of code that's been touched. And yeah, one more thing you can do after going code coverage is that you can click on individual JavaScript file and you can scroll the code also in the sources. Right. So this will give us more detailed insights of which are the functions being used, which are the functions that's not being used on the first fold. Right. So we can lazy load them or we can play with them. Right. Then yes, then comes this is the basic the tools that we are using. I'm mostly using PageSpeed insights to look into my code and like look at the insights because Google is the I think mostly traffic we are getting from Google, right? So that is something we need to look into, right? And then usually I analyze JavaScript bundle more, and then I go to GT metrics. So the order is something like that. First Google PageSpeed, I into all the checkpoints on Google PageSpeed and I apply them. Then I go to Webpack Bundle Analyzer and I basically divide and rule. Right? So we divide all Java libraries as smaller as possible. Right. And then I'll go to GP metrics if the site is still load. Then I'll check like which can be there might be third party libraries which might be causing an issue. So I can look into and I can check it. Right. And yeah, obviously code coverage is also important. Usually I use code coverage to improvise my CSS lines to remove. To remove CSS lines. Right. Okay, so in basic XML CSS, often I think many of you might be aware of these things. Right. So first thing is obviously resizing the images in proper sizes. Right. So if that's 250 or 100 of width of size, right. So we need to make sure that the images are resized properly. Right. We need to make sure that they are compressed. Right. So even if that's PNG or JPG images, or even if we can compress the SVG, that's larger SVG files. Right. Larger SVG images. Right. So we should compress those files and put them. Then there is at recently, I think in Chrome 76 around they have added an attribute called loading is equal to lazy, right? So what this attribute does is it uh, uh, so you might have seen that when you go in Google Images when you scroll the page, the Google loads the image, right? So that's called lazy loading of images, right? So what you can do is you can apply this loading is equal to lazy class, and it will work by default on many of the Chromium-based browsers, right? And you can also use third-party libraries, but that will increase our bundle size, right? So I usually prefer to go with the native code, right? So loading is equal to lazy. Just add this to all the images or most of the images you are using. That is above your first fold, and you are good to go, right? And obviously compressing and resizing them is one of the important aspects, right? Then yeah, then one more thing is we are using in Vue.js we have something called single file component, right? So in that we are writing the template over there, we are putting the script over there, and we are writing the style over there, right? So usually what we should do is rather than creating a separate CSS file for styles, right? Like Bootstrap, what we have to do, we should do is we should create the style along with the components, right? So this will make the code clean, obviously, because if the component is loaded, the style will be loaded, right? So this will make sure that automatically your code will be optimized and your speed will be improved, right? Because the style will only loaded if the component will be used somewhere, right? Otherwise, the style won't be loaded at all, right? So you can also generalize the style. Let's say you can have a common bootstrap and you can remove some of the styles from that and use them directly in this style section of single file component, right? You can also one more thing I usually do is sometimes what we see is when you request any page, this usually applies to SSR friendly pages, right? So the response might be, let's say, 100 KB, 200 KB. Sometimes I even seen 500 KB of response sizes, right? So what we can do is, when we have larger HTML response size, right, that's due to SSR. So we can also do this thing that if some of the components are shown on hover or something like that, right? So we can, rather using display none or display block, we can also apply add those components using VL, right? So what will happen on the first SSR response, those HTML won't be there, right? And when the page loads, if user hovers those components, the HTML will be there, right? So I usually use it. This is a basically trick I use to remove extra HTML that's not needed in the screen, right? I'll use them in hover, let's say drop down, or even sometimes we have search suggestions, right? So I use VEF as far as possible rather than VShow, right? So that is something you can do to remove the extra code that's been there, right? Then we have, then it comes the main thing, that is JavaScript code optimization, right? So one thing is, so this is the most time taking thing, right? Because in this you will like go to many components and you will have to play with many components, right? So this, what I suggest is, whenever you are improvising something, let's say you found that moment, you want to improvise moment.js or anything, right? So go one by one and improvise the thing, right? So let's go into the next slide and we'll see how can we do that, right? Yeah, so first thing is dynamic import, right? So what dynamic import does is, there is already a concept of dynamic import in webpack. This is the webpack feature, not VueJS or Nuxt.js feature. So what we can do is, let's say when we load a page. So as I told you, we have the components which are shown on hover, right? We might have components which are shown on some, let's say, button click activities, or any other user that are shown on user interaction. Right? So what we can do is, we can lazy load them by using Webpack's inbuilt functionalities, right? So dynamic import is something that's already being used inside Nuxt.js for routing, right? So when we create, let's say, home page or any other page, right? So those pages will only be loaded, or the JS of those pages will only be loaded when user navigates to those pages, right? They won't be loaded like upfront, right? So that's already there in Nuxt.js, right? But for models, pop-ups, so for this, what we do is, we just write a code and we like forget, and then the page becomes heavy, right? So what we can do is, the components which we do not need on in the uh, first load, we can dynamic, we can use the feature of dynamic import, right? So what we have to do is, like, we usually do something like import model login from folder path and .vue, right? Which is /model /login.vue, right? So what we can do is, we can write it as a const model is equal to curly braces, like use a lambda function, and we can use import function, right? So what this import function does is, whenever we use the model login, it will load that. Right? So what we have done is, we might have a button, and we might be triggering that model component using VEF else, right? So when we click a button, there might be some variable of, let's say, show model, right? And so when user clicks a button, the browser will request for the JavaScript of this model login, right? The view for the view, right? And then only it will be loaded on demand, right? So what I do is, I usually what I have done is, I usually have applied I usually convert all the import model to const model, or import dynamic import, and then I load them on, say, 2 to 3 seconds after the page loads. Right. So what this does is, my first page completion time increases, like, let's say, by 1 second or 2 seconds, right? And my models will be loaded, which are, let's say, sign up model, or any other n number of model, sign up, sign in, login, forget password, any model, right? So those will be loaded after 2 seconds, 3 seconds, right? Then, you can also, so dynamic imports mostly will work with VEF else, right? So if you have a component which is shown on condition, right? So you have one, let's say, music app, right? So in the music app, you might have, let's say, video component for some of the music, and you might not have the video component for other music which doesn't have video, right? So when you use VEF, right? So that JavaScript will only be loaded, or that view will only be loaded if you have used dynamic import. If the music is video, right? So when we apply, let's say, VEF, is that a video, right? So that component will be loaded dynamically on demand, right? So for other normal music files, it won't be loaded, or normal music page, it won't be loaded at all, right? So this will increase the speed for those users, or particularly users who just want, let's say, a single type of force, right? This single type of, other type of pages, right? Then, one thing is, so this is regarding dynamic imports, right? So you can use VEF, you can use this for routing, you can use this for models and pop-ups, right? Then we have something, so mostly what happens that we most of our speed improvement is can be done by improvising our libraries. So I think most of us will be using Moment.js, right? For let's say one or two, we want to improvise our page speed for one or two pages, right? So what we do is we use Moment.js, we import that Nuxt via Nuxt module, and we just use it, right? So what we can do is we can replace this type of libraries with other libraries that's available and recommended by some of these are also recommended by Google, right? So we can use those libraries which will speed up our code or our execution time, right? For example, let's say we have something like moment over here, which is used to format the date in the date and right? So what we can do is we can use date FNS libraries available there, right? So we can use that library and we can use the function from that, right? Which are basically import friendly, right? So if you use or load the format function, then that function will only be loaded, right? Then Lodash also what we have to do is rather than importing the full library like Lodash, what we can do is we can import the function we need, right? So let's say we might need a shorting function, right? So what we can do is rather than using import underscore from Lodash, we can use import short by from Lodash / short by, right? So they do have already ECMAScript, a webpack bundle available, right? So what we can do is we can use that directly, right? Rather than loading all the full library, right? Yeah, it's already there. Also, if you don't want to, there are also many import transformation available. So Lodash does have one of the time which is called Babel plugin transform import, right? So using that, you can also optimize your Lodash directly, right? We might be using one of the popular library that is what WG Patch, right? So we can replace that with unfetch. Then yeah, rather than importing full bootstrap view, right? We can do is we can just import the components we want, right? So let's import. I just want a model over there, or I just want a button, or I just want a pop over or anything, right? So what I can do is rather than importing full in Nuxt modules, what I'll do is I'll go to that particular component and I'll import there, right? So something writing something like import and then curly braces and we drop down, right, from bootstrap view, right? So this will only load only load the portion of the bootstrap view that we need on that component, that particular component, right? And again, as we are loading this file inside the component, right? So it won't be downloaded on other homepage or any other pages, right? So it will be particularly, let's say, if the drop down is inside the dashboard, so that will only be used inside the dashboard or imported inside the dashboard, right? Yeah, this is already the last point is there, right? Importing packages in components individually, right, rather than using them as a module or plugins in Nuxt config, right? So if I'm using Nuxt moment in my Nuxt config modules, right, what I have to do is I'll remove that it from there, and wherever I'm using that moment file or Lodash file, so I'll import in that particular component. Right? So what will this do is this will create a proper chain of our webpack modules, right? And using this, you will see improved bundle your when you reach after removing this from your modules and importing into the component itself, you will see your bundle will be divided into one more file, right? So this will basically divide your let's say vendor.js or main.js step by step, right? So we talked about bundle in the previous step, right? So you will see improved bundle by importing packages in the component itself, or let's say removing and improving moment.js, right? So that can be useful, right? Then yes, this is also I think the same thing as previous, right? So rather than importing everything in the global main.js or Nuxt modules, we should use them inside the component, right? So here is an example, like I'm using carousel that is from Vue carousel, right? So what I'll do is I import them in the component I need, or in the slider or anywhere I need, right? So I won't be loading them as a common plugin or module, right? So this will allow Webpack to manage dependencies properly, right? So it will create a proper dependency chain inside the website, right? So yeah, these are the some ways that you can improvise your JavaScript, and trust me, using this thing, you will be able to improve your speed by 50 to 70% at least, right? And using all these steps, we have improved our pace frame from 40, that was 40 to 80, right? And right now also we have added bad code in earlier in the site, so we'll be removing them also. Right. Yes. And yeah, this is also something that can be useful. Like this, that is called split chunks, right? So Webpack does have this. What we do is we have one vendor, right? So let's say when you go and you decide that okay, I'll need like there are all the modules I want. mm, I mean, all the modules I have used, I need them in the global level only, right? So what you can do is you can speed up at least uh, by dividing them into, let's say if there's a one file worth 500 kb or 700 kb, right? So what you can do is you can divide that file into three files, right? So what this will do is, thanks to http 2.0, this will load all those javascript files in parallel, right? So this will give us more speed in the initial load, right? So if you think that your package or node modules is larger and you must have to use that, right? So you can use this optimization portion of Webpack, which gives a key called split chunks, right? So in that you can give minimum size and maximum size, and it will basically split your vendor up, right? So let's say if you have this is basically unzipped file, right? So this is unzipped file size, right? So it's 750 KB I have taken. So usually that will trim down to 120 KB around in with gzip compression, right? So what I've done is my vendor was 500 KB, right? I wanted to divide that at 500 KB with gzip, right? Or if you count normal, so that maybe around 2 to 4 MB, right? So what I did was I just went to optimization split chunks and I gave the minimum size and maximum size. Right? So minimum size is also important, right? Because what happens sometimes that some of the libraries might be very tiny, right? Let's say uh, you might be using some utility JavaScript only, right? So that those libraries can be very tiny, less than a KB or 2 KB or 3 KB, right? So we need to make sure that they will be bundled along with some other library, right? So what this will do is this will divide our 2 to 5 or 4 MB of our our vendor into 750 KB each, or 50 KB to 750 KB each, and then they will be loaded on the page load in parallel, right? So this will also improve our page speed because we are requesting multiple resources at the time. So this will be due to thanks to HTTP technology, it will be divided into multiple requests, right? Yeah, so these are some of the basic and very useful JavaScript optimization that you can use. Dynamic imports are there. You can use it with mostly with Weave and VLs. Then optimization our library, we can replace our libraries with lesser size or ECMAScript friendly libraries, right? Because most of us are improvising or updating our browser regularly. That's all of the browsers now support ECMAScript. I think 2015 build. That so we don't have to load or any polyfills in base, right? So we can directly replace this library with smaller libraries, right? Then importing everything in component rather than importing them in globally, right? So this will also be helpful for like most of all your projects, right? Then yes, split chunks is like something that I use at the end, like if the things doesn't work with earlier things, right? Then only this will be useful, right? But yeah, many times it can be useful. Okay. Then some of the other optimizations that you can use, and I think most of them will be already identified via Google PageSpeed when you run that Google PageSpeed insights, right? So they'll show you stuff like, let's say, caching, right? So you must have proper caching headers set, right? So if that's not there, you can tell your, let's say, infrastructure engineer that hey, this JavaScript is not properly cached. Can you set, let's say, 1 month or 6 months of caching time in that, right? Then yes, if your app is kind of web app, right? So something like, let's say, Twitter, right? So service worker can be a very useful, right? Because what service worker does is it's kind of our JavaScript inside the user's browser, right? So what it does is increases our repeated visit time, right? So even if when you switch off your internet and you load Twitter, so it will load. I mean, the loading skeleton will load, right? So that is due to service workers, right? So what when your app is morely dashboard kind of app, when which requires users to log in and do the stuff, right? So you must use service workers, and that will uh, add add the performance for consecutive request. I mean consecutive user experience. Then yes, CDNs we can use CDNs like Cloudfront, which can be. I mean you know CDN, right? So it can deliver our JavaScript file blazing fast, right? Then there are also other Next.js optimization methods which I have used, something called when this is mostly useful when we have two types of sites. So right, so one is obviously SSR, right? So when you are doing SSR friendly site, like we have more than 2 million pages indexed, right? So what I do is some of the libraries to improve my server speed. I usually use this thing that I don't load some of the libraries at server side, right? For example, let's say I don't want carousel to be there on the server side, right? It can be rendered in the client side itself, right? So you mark them as a process.client and or process.server, and I just use them when I need them, right? So this can also be useful to improve the server side rendering rather than client side rendering, right? So this is also like it will make our site to time for first byte will be fast, right? So yeah, these are also like other optimization methods which you can use to speed or improve your site. And trust me, like your once you apply all this stuff, like for your heavy website, and your site will be like 50 to 70% faster, right? And then obviously one thing is for sure that we have to repeat, right? So the thing is, we do this kind of auditing every 3 months or 6 months, right? Then in which we check our page speed, and I mean, we check the page speed and stuff like every month or every week, but we sit for improvisation quarterly or by quarterly, right? And check like what can be improved, and we assign resources for that, right? So we have to do like once you optimize your site, after 3 or 4 months, you again have to sit and look at like what code, what is the portion of code that needs to improve, right? Okay, so yeah, so that's it from my side. Thank you. I think I'll be happy to take questions from the you guys.